The most recent launch we did, we were actually most trending repo in the world for a week. The interesting thing about a product talent launch is they're all different audiences. The developer audience is much more forgiving as long as you're really authentic about where you're at with the product.
Today's guest, Daniel Farrell, co-founded Onlook, an open source AI-powered visual editor for code. What started as a prototype just a year ago shot to #1 on Hacker News several times, picked up thousands of GitHub stars in days, and spent actually multiple days as the #1 trending repo in the entire world. Now at over 21,000 stars and more than 100 contributors, Daniel's on a mission to erase the friction between design and development, and his approach is unlike anything the industry's seen before. Daniel, excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Wow, what a killer intro. All right.
Well, I try. So I teased a little bit what you are and what you're doing, but in your own words, please tell us about Onlook and what you're building.
Yeah, so we're building Onlook. It's essentially the open source cursor for designers. We built a visual editor for code that lets anyone jump into a code base, drag, drop, move things around, chat with AI, essentially make changes to that code base without needing to know anything about writing code.
Wow. Okay. I stayed away from the cursor for X or whatever, but you jumped in. That's how I got to know you in the first place, and that's how I got excited. Quick side note before I forget, because I usually always forget. If you're enjoying these shows, if you're enjoying behind the scenes, all those YC founders who come and tell you their story, please hit the subscribe button. You can find us on your favorite podcast app, on YouTube, where you can actually watch us. And if you're on YouTube, also hit the bell icon so you're notified every time we publish a video. Thank you so much in advance. Okay, take me back, please, with at the beginning with your co-founder kit, where you looked at each other and decided, okay, we're going to build Onlook. We're going to build this open source project to revolutionize this space that's quite busy already. How did it get started?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's a blend of both of our backgrounds, and how we ended up meeting was quite serendipitous. We were both tinkering with ways to solve the gap between design and development, because we had both come from both sides of the equation. So I've done design for about a decade. I've done UI, UX, branding, logos, all that type of stuff on product teams and at agencies. And it was almost frustrating as a designer that I was always removed from the end output. I was producing pictures of a product, not the actual product. And code was doable. It just always took so long to get into it. And so once AI started, bubbling up in the tech space, it felt like, okay, maybe this could be the glue between these two fields. And so I was tinkering around with some ideas. It just so happened at the same time my co-founder was. His background was, he was ex-Amazon. He also worked at ServiceNow. And at ServiceNow, he maintained their design system. And he felt the pain point from the other side, the engineering side, where it would take him longer to get up to speed on the context of a change being made to a code base rather than actually making that change himself. Generally, sometimes it would take an hour to understand what actually needs to work when the change would only take 30 seconds. And so frustrated, he started tinkering with some ideas. He built an early version of V0 before V0 existed. He was playing around with stable diffusion as a way to kind of solve this gap between design and engineering. And a friend of mine actually had sent me Kiet's landing page for the first developer tool for designers. And so I signed up for his waitlist. And then a few months later, Kiet reached out to me on YC's co-founder matching platform, saying, hey, I'm looking for a design co-founder for this idea. And so we decided to start working together then. And so, Kiet had essentially had a prototype at that time of a Chrome extension. We felt like, people had become familiar with browsers and the ability to kind of inspect elements and change some of the text on the page. If you're a little bit enterprising or entrepreneurial, you might have discovered these subtle features and the developer tools that come with a browser. And so we thought, okay, maybe if we can build something for designers that allows them to directly manipulate the product as it's rendered in the browser, there could be something interesting there. And so we felt like, okay, let's run with this Chrome extension idea and see if we can sell to designers. It turns out that that was quite a bit of a challenge. So, but I'll pause there because the rest goes deep into the product and where we arrived at. But the origin story essentially was the design and dev equation meeting up serendipitously and trying to solve it ourselves.
That's really cool. Another YC company born out of the co-founder matching platform. There's more and more actually.
Mhm.
So it actually does
Yeah,
work. And that's a common
it
question I
takes a
have. Oh,
long
I'm
time. Yeah, it takes like
tell
a
us
really long
tell us
time
about the
though.
experience.
Yeah, I mean, like I signed up because I knew I wanted to find a co-founder, and I previously founded companies when I was in college, and I like, finding a co-founder is like extremely difficult, and so it took me like 8 months or something on the platform of talking to. I think I may have talked to 30 people, maybe messaged like 50 or something like that, and yeah, I mean, you're really looking for like the right vibe and motivation, but when I had a call with Kiet, it was just so clear he was going to go build this company with or without me. I mean, he's just like incredibly determined, and that's what you really want in a co-founder. So it became pretty obvious that working with him would be a good idea.
That's pretty awesome. And it's interesting because it might, maybe, I'm guessing, it might seem, oh, 30 meetings is maybe not that much. Well, when you have to do them back to back, week after week, meeting people, and every time you're thinking,
Mm-hmm.
is this my co founder? Oh, no, it
Yeah,
turns
yeah.
out it's not. 30 is actually a lot of meetings. It's a huge amount. So you're right. It does take
Mm-hmm.
time and dedication. It's also a filtering function. If you're just the type of person who's going to do 5 meetings, probably you're not going to find the right co-founder. But if you're the type of person like you who's going to do 30 plus, then you finally end up with the right person. But that's not instantaneous. But
Mm-hmm.
that's a great sort of side loop into the conversation. But thank you for that. Many
Mm-hmm.
people that I see on this channel or that I meet ask me, "Oh, I need a co-founder. I don't know whom." It's You're right. One of the most difficult thing to find, or person actually to find, and one of the most difficult thing to get started. YC co-founder matching platform really helps there. Just to finish on that topic, because I'm curious, did you take the questionnaire to make sure that's why YC recommends to make sure all of your interests and philosophies and long-term goals are aligned, or did you just feel the vibe and that was enough for you?
I think we were pretty calculated about it, because both him and I have both been trying to meet co-founders at the time. So I guess like maybe we had built up enough of a repertoire of understanding what needs to happen for us to feel comfortable in making that leap. And I think when you're looking for a co-founder, you're not looking for like a perfect 100% match. I feel like that's just like unrealistic. You're looking for a greater than 50% match, right? But I think that like you're trying to gather enough evidence for you to have conviction that this person is going to be along for the ride. And we actually wrote a lot about that experience on our Substack. That's been an article I've shared a lot with other people looking for co-founders. And to answer your question about the questionnaire, we decided to do like a co-founder work trial where we both just unpaid, no equity discussion, just for like a month work together and understand how we balance each other out. And I think the important thing is you just don't really know what's going to happen until you actually start working together. And I think you need to want it bad enough to just start doing it, right? Like I think a lot of people get into the co-founder thing expecting to immediately decide on equity and immediately give titles and otherwise, but all of those conversations are just like not going to matter if it just doesn't end up working. And I think you start building a little bit of a respect for each other as you get that experience in.
Yeah, that's cool. Start with work and don't start with titles and equity. And like you just said, most likely you actually don't end up working together, and so they don't matter. The odds are kind of against you at the beginning. So start with the work, and then if the odds are favorable, then you can decide on the rest. Okay, very cool. Let's go back to our main topic. You actually were starting to answer my next question, which is a question around form factor. So you started as a Chrome extension. I think if I'm not mistaken, then you went into a full downloadable software, and then you went to full online cloud-based. Maybe that's not exactly it, but I think that's super interesting because so many people think about form factor um, in vibe coding being one, but many other different areas. So what was your thinking through all of that? What were your learnings? How did you arrive at what you are today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the form factor thing has been really fascinating because in some ways it feels like a pivot, but we've always maintained the same mission, right? And so it just was getting us closer and closer to getting to this like frictionless state, and then inevitably into like the holy grail, which is flow state, where you're actually able to work with the tool and the tool melts away as you try to get to the objective of what you have in your head to what you want to actually produce in the world. And so we had started with this Chrome extension, and we had essentially borrowed some of the UI from this one tool called VisBug, which was made by Adam Argyle, who's like a former dev advocate at Google, where it was essentially this way that you can have like these CSS, change the CSS from a little toolbar on the page. And let me just say that the Chrome extension like space, it is extremely difficult to get a product that like makes sense to users, because we essentially were trying to balance, okay, you have this version of the website that now you've turned into this like creative mode, and now you need to save that state and put it into a project, but then that project needs to go into a PR, into GitHub, but then you need to like track how that happens. And there were so many different surfaces there, and it was so difficult for designers to understand what the hell was going on that we just like, it was really difficult for 6 months to try to get people to use it. And part of the inspiration, I mean, I don't know if it was like an especially embarrassing like version of Onlook, but it definitely was frustrating to use. And I think you have to really grit your teeth to get through a lot of the like shortcomings on the UX. And as a designer, like that pains me a lot to see that people like weren't able to use it well. So my co-founder had a bit of a hunch that maybe we should turn the concept inside out. Like maybe rather than doing a Chrome extension, we should just build our own browser, which is kind of that downloadable desktop product that you had alluded to. So we also like got a little bit of a sense from our first attempt at applying to YC for the summer batch of 25 that we should maybe switch from designers to developers. We had this insight when we had interviewed with YC for the summer batch. Gary and Aaron were like, you guys are great, like we love what you're doing, but if you're going to touch the code base, you need to get buy-in from developers. And so that was a little bit of the inspiration for taking, turning the concept inside out, but then also marketing more to developers.
Okay, perfect transition for me. I want to go to the open source journey that you've been on, because it's been pretty incredible. So like I said in the introduction, more than 20,000, 21,000 GitHub stars, but most importantly, #1 trending repo in the world on GitHub for several days, and actually twice maybe, or once was #1 and the other time was second or something. Anyway, it's insane. Like #1 trending repo in the world. So, of course, don't tell us all of your secrets, but I'm sure many, many, many people would love to hear what you have to say on how you did it. Let's start there, and then we can explore on what happened for you, how it felt. But how do you get to be the #1 trending repo in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of like a cyclical effect that happens when you initially need to get momentum with like the star count. And for us, we were very fortunate that Hacker News was always really kind to us. We had used Hacker News as a great opportunity to share our progress on the product, and the headline that we had first launched with was an open source Webflow. And I think it really resonated with a lot of the design and developer community that tends to spend a lot of time on Hacker News. And so that initial momentum had kind of kickstarted the initial star growth. But once you get it to a certain threshold on GitHub, and I think it's relative, it's the amount of stars you gain on a day relative to all the other repos. You can start getting into this like really incredible trending bucket where they, algorithmically will start elevating your project on the trending page. And then of course that causes this flywheel of people discovering the project, starring it more, and continuing to go and grow the star count. And so when we had done our Hacker News launch, as well as our Product Hunt launch, and then another Hacker News launch, and then more recently another Hacker News launch, each of those had kind of kicked off that flywheel. And you're right that we were adding so many stars a day that the algorithm just kept picking us up. And the most recent launch we did, we were actually like most trending repo in the world for a week. And so they put us into like the weekly bucket because we just added so many stars. And so that was like really, really incredible. And I think like the interesting thing about a Product Hunt launch or a Hacker News launch or like trending on GitHub is they're kind of all different audiences. And so I think that the developer audience is much more forgiving as long as you're really authentic about kind of where you're at with the product. Product Hunt is a little more like, I guess, consumer and less technical. And so I think a lot of people come in with expectations and they're a little bit more guns blazing about what the quality of the product should look like. So in each of those kind of spaces, you just need to make sure that you're positioning your product well for the audience.
It's interesting. I would get, if I sum it up, it's another win for YC because what kicked off you guys trending on GitHub is actually Hacker News. So
Mhm.
that's another. I want to say well kept secret. It's not really a secret anymore, but still, some people they just launch on Product Hunt and they don't launch on Hacker News, and it's open to anyone, even if you're not in the YC community. So Hacker News is really cool.
Mhm.
Okay,
It's how we
think
actually got into YC too. Actually, like when so I guess what was missing from that origin story was that when we had pivoted towards building this browser and then launched it as the open source Webflow within like a day of building it. That's when it got its first 1,000 stars, and then Aaron actually emailed us a few weeks later, just saying, "Hey, how's it going?" And then we got on a call with him, and he was like, "Do you guys want to do the YC batch? We'd love to have you." And
wow.
so that like the momentum of Hacker News, like they are also paying attention to the projects there. So a great way to potentially pique the interest of YC is actually to be really successful on Hacker News.
It's crazy because so many people, millions, just dream of making it to YC. You guys got inbound from YC asking you to come or offering you to apply at least. But
Mm-hmm.
like that's insane. That's the dream for just so many people. So like you said,
Mm-hmm.
being very, very big and trending on Hacker News is just one way, probably. I'm not sure it's guaranteed. YC never said anything about, but it's probably
Yeah.
one very good way to at least get their attention. So that's pretty awesome. And it's very simple for YC. That the calculation is make something people want. If you're trending on Hacker News, the community of Hacker News, which is pretty tech savvy, wants what you're making. So make something people want. It makes
Mm-hmm.
sense that you would come and build it there. Okay, let's go now to the other side. How does it feel? Now try to make us dream a little bit. You open your computer, you see you're the number one trending repo in the world. Feelings, emotions, but also what comes from that. It must be just like when people are on Shark Tank, tens of thousands of emails, or I don't know. Tell us what happens actually when this happens to you.
Yeah, I mean, it has happened a few times, and each time, like it's just like a fire is going off, right? And I think the maximalist in me really wants to make the most of that opportunity, and we try our best to set up all of the like the go-to-market infrastructure, right? So we can understand where people are coming from, like how are people using the product, but it's never going to be perfect, and there are like small fires going on everywhere. They're all good fires, but sometimes you want to like stoke it a little bit more. Sometimes people are saying things that like maybe don't help the product, and so you're kind of like trying to draw attention away from it. So it's almost like it's a fire drill of me on comms. Like I'm working on trying to keep things going, and then it's a fire drill on product where we have so much more momentum and so much more signal for what people want and what bugs people are running into that my co-founder Kiet is just like hammering away at the keyboard, and we're like trying to order food and like bring it in and keep ourselves alive, and like we're losing sleep and we're trying to caffeinate when all this noise is coming in. And I think you could look at all the metrics, and of course with every launch, right, you kind of like see this tapering down, a huge spike, and then it kind of is like tapers down a little bit, but then you arrive at a new baseline that's much higher than where it was before, because eventually the SEO kind of settles and like people are now aware and they start sharing with their colleagues. So you have these kind of like reverb effects that happen after a launch. But it's very exciting, especially to see so much excitement from people around the world. In fact, I think we saw like Japan and China as two of like our largest markets of people sharing it widely on X, but also joining our Discord, and we had to open up a couple of like international channels just to accommodate some of those new users.
Yeah, it's crazy. I see so many YC open source companies trending in Japan. You're not the first
Mm-hmm.
one. You're one of the, but I see it a lot. And so I was actually curious. I actually went to Japan a couple weeks ago,
Okay.
and it's crazy. Everyone uses X there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
much more than I've never seen that. You take the metro, the subway, everyone's on X. People are not on Candy Crush or something. They're just
Yeah.
on X
Yeah.
the entire time, and everything's in Japanese. I don't understand anything. Maybe it's not tech, but at least it's I don't know. They're very tech savvy and
Yeah.
looking at open source and the US for that. And I think that's reflects really well on them. That's a great feature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of this is only possible because of open source. Several questions. Was it obvious for you from the beginning that you were going to be open source?
I mean, I think we had felt like it would be probably one of the most authentic go-to-markets for reaching developers. I think my co-founder and I really value being like honest in ourselves and authentic, and I think the developer community also aligns with that a lot. If you try to be performative in any way, you'll be met with skepticism. And I think for developers themselves, it's not that they would go and look at a code base. Like very few people, I think, actually have the time or appetite to do so. But it's almost like the possibility that they could go look at it is what's important to them. And so I think it does a couple of things. And I think it's really, really helped us. One is that we need like the buy-in of developers, much to the point of like Gary and Aaron, the advice they gave us, right? To be able to have people who are non-technical contribute to a code base. In the past, there had been so many like attempts at solving design to dev handoff, and each of those attempts had required a code base be designed or built a certain way, where you have to cordon off a part of it to accommodate your non-technical teams, or you need to refactor it or change it. And one thing that was very unique about Onlook is that you don't need to change anything about your code base to use Onlook with it. And so that really, really appealed to developers. Another thing is that like we understand that the product when we had launched at the time was really not, it was just like a prototype. It was barely functional. And so if we were to go open source, like one, it's a pretty cool concept, and two, open source enables us to have more people contribute back into the product. And so we almost have this like on-demand resource of people who are just excited to contribute to a good project, who would volunteer to put in code and help us with every little bit of this editor experience, which is quite critical for a design tool. And we had never seen a design tool do this before. So it's been a really interesting go-to-market.
It's fascinating because it's net positive in every way you look at it. You get momentum and traction. You actually end up trending on GitHub, and it brings you stars plus SEO plus people actually using it. You actually get people sort of working for you for free, and I mean, they're contributors and they get recognition, but that's what it is. And yet, still very few tech products are open source. So my next question: do you think many more companies should be open source? And of course, given what we just said, the obvious answer seems to be yes, but maybe there's some counters that we haven't mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fascinating topic because I talk with other open source founders, and it is almost exactly 50-50. Like half the people are like, it's the greatest thing that we've ever done for the company, and we're killing it. It's helped us with enterprise, it's helped us with consumer. But then the other 50% are like, it was like such a waste of time. Like we're spending so much time trying to manage the community. Yeah. And so I think, I mean, the tough part is like you kind of, I think the best advice for considering whether you should do open source is what your appetite as a founder is to take care of it. Because when you go open source, you are now like subjecting yourself to the opinions of the masses, right? The developers. And I think you need to a bit of it like control the narrative, but also like inspire the narrative. And then you also need to take care of your community. One thing we're really grateful for is the amount of passion that has come from community members from around the globe. Like we have people from so many different countries that are just like volunteering to put things into our product, but they're not going to do that if they don't see that there's momentum happening. And so we try to keep a really tight turnaround between the time somebody puts a pull request into our product and the time that we essentially review it and get back to them or accept it, because it's a sign that the project's alive and well, and that we like are really appreciative of people putting in that time. So if you as a founder don't have like the capacity or the, maybe you're like not willing to kind of nurture the community, or it doesn't come naturally to you, you either need to find a co-founder who can do that for you, or maybe think of like a different tactic there.
It's interesting. I get it. It's a nice way of saying, yes, there are some negatives. And I guess it's, yes, once you build a community, you have to take care of it. And it might seem to our listeners like, oh my God, it's so simple. You just maintain your community, but in exchange, you get all this, exposure and free contributors. Maintaining a community is hard. I've done it in the past. Yeah. It's not easy. People, when they're not happy, they're just going to tell you. and you need to be on your Discord every single day, and it actually takes time, and it takes headspace to be always, helping and answering questions and stuff like that. So that's very interesting. That's the positive, and that's the negative. I was thinking of, I had on this podcast Michel Tricot from Airbyte, another open source company from YC, massively successful. And he told me he was very, very positive on the open source. He told me, yes, it helped us with enterprise, it helped us with contributors. It was a massively, really positive outlook for them. I wanted to double down on something you said, which you said go to market. It can help you with enterprise, and people try you. And then before recording, we were talking about the sort of what you call the Superbase playbook. I don't know if it's the Superbase playbook or the open source playbook, but basically, I'll let you talk about it. Of course, we know about the open source idea is you can, what I had in mind is any developer can download it and try it. And then if they like it, they're going to be your champion so that the company buys it. That was my idea. And so if the champion is good enough, then you're able to directly sell an enterprise contract to that company. I think your idea of open source GTM is slightly different and maybe much smarter than mine. So tell me what it is, please.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I didn't quite understand the value of open source as somebody who's entirely non-technical. And I mean, you've spent so much more time talking to these companies, so I feel like your perspective on open source is much broader than mine. But what we're starting to see for us internally is a couple of things. And this kind of comes, I guess, to the Superbase playbook, which is you have two realms of your product. One is the open source one, and then you have the hosted one. And the hosted one is something that people can pay for off the website, and it's great. I don't have to do anything except put some money down, and then suddenly I have the service. But the other realm, which is to go the self-hosted route, is you take the code base down, and then you put in all the dependencies and everything you need to. You essentially rebuild the Lego set from scratch, and then you suddenly can have that service for yourself or your own company. And what we found is that it's actually an advantage for really small teams to have open source where really large organizations can do the self-hosted approach for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of times if they self-host, they might actually have features that they want built, and they might just build it and then make those features back into the original project that they had pulled from. It's a little bit of the cool nature of open source. It's so cool. Yeah, and it's something that I didn't quite understand until I realized that developers are just they're very builder focused, very hacker community, and I think it's a boost to everyone to kind of give back to the initial project. And so you could have these really large teams actually making PRs back into your core code. The other thing is that it gives enterprises an opportunity to try your product without having to go through all of the legal hoops. Some teams that we're talking to need 9 or 12 months before they can get any sort of software approved. And so for them to go through that purchasing process, it's excruciating, right? You need internal champions, you need all these resources allocated towards it. But if you're able to just tap a developer on the shoulder who might be enthusiastic about it and say, hey, why don't we take this for a spin and just try it out? Then it's a much quicker path for them to be able to adopt it internally. And then that goes back to that first point, which is then as they make changes, they'll make pull requests back into the original project. The third advantage is that you as a team could potentially, there's a couple ways you could do it. I think there's one approach to open source is you sell consulting services where the product itself is self-hosted, but then you offer, a couple grand a month or something like that, or a huge annual contract for you to staff up account managers and other people for deployed engineers to go and equip these teams with the know-how to actually get it all set up and operating correctly. But that's really headcount intensive. The other flavor of this is that, we're a super small team. We're just 2 people. We don't have the headcount to just work with all these enterprises. They can go spin it up themselves. They can go add in whatever features they want. They are essentially taking the burden of headcount for their enthusiasm for the product. And of course, as founders, we want them to be successful, but there's no paid engagement or anything. The benefit though is that we get to work with them closely, understand the requirements, build out our like enterprise go to market with like a really deep understanding and use cases from that team. And they're always happy to put a logo, like allow us to use their logo on the homepage. And so you kind of have this like this placeholder where you get to work with the enterprise without having all the headcount and expenditures associated with that, while you develop your product in such a way that eventually it's in their interest to potentially move back over to you because they're using internal resources to keep this thing spun up. And so you can have like a better hosted product that would work for them. And then the fourth thing is that, you know, besides of course like the legal requirements and otherwise, if they self-host it, they could do it behind their own firewalls and security. So it may have even been a non-starter in the first place for them to use a separate product when they're trying to work, or they're working with like really sensitive information. And so that's like another really unique opportunity for it and something I didn't quite understand. So it's just like, you know, you really get a lot of leverage out of the open source approach because people are able to access the product in a frictionless way for their own specific use case.
It's a really good. It's a lot of really good arguments for open source. I'm convinced. I want to build open source as well. There's so many good reasons. And some, I want to double down or just repeat what you said because you went quickly, but just for everyone to understand. The difference with what I said is not the champion that's going to sell it. It's they're going to self-host it. And so initially you might not make a single dollar from it because it's behind their firewall, it's self-hosted by them, etc. But with time, it might be in their interest to bring back the hosting to you for several reasons, because it's allowing them to decrease their headcount, because now they've had the time to see that it really is useful and they can take the 9 to 12 months to actually go through procurement and security and actually buying it. And because over time you might have developed or created some new features that they need, that it's easier for them instead of integrating them to just go with you. So over time, you might get them back. They might not even know it when they start. Oh, it's free forever. It's open source. Over time, you might actually get them back, which I think is really cool. So open source all the way. All right. Closing for a minute. Oh, sorry. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the other topic here with open source is, of course, in the context of AI, right? Where suddenly you have like an entire new batch of people who are now enthusiastic about code. And with that batch of people, there will always be a percentage that is excited about this prospect of open source. And so I think we wouldn't have done the open source topic like it's true justice unless we had addressed that there is now going to be so much more software out there that if you're able to go the open source route, it could really become an advantage, especially if something feels a little bit of like commoditized. You know, for example, everyone talks about how landing pages for prompt to build products are all the same, right? And I feel like there's a little bit of like a commoditization of that UX. But if you take our route, which is to open source that, then a lot of people can start from scratch using the bones of what we've already built. And that kind of plays back into the brand of being like the best performer or the best player in that specific category. So I definitely would encourage you, especially in like the world where AI is producing tons and tons and tons more software, to think about how open source could fit into your playbook for go-to-market. That's
really cool. I almost wish we could end it there but I have more questions for you. We have more time. That's awesome. This will be a clip that I can cut and share. All right. I want to go into a completely different direction because now you started me on this topic, which is really cool. That's not what I was going to ask. So thank God you added this. That's perfect. Let's talk about what's going to happen to design teams, to marketing teams, to the people who are implementing the marketing team's idea into the design and to the website with tools like Onlook and others, but with AI in general, and you're part of that revolution. Who should be scared? Who's going to lose their job? Who should start learning new skills? Talk to me if I'm a designer listening to this, and probably there's many because you're a design product. What should I be worried about? What should I be doing? How is everything going to change in the next 3 years? Some powered by you, some powered by others, but what's the impact of AI on those millions of jobs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think like the key thing is you need to be starting to learn how agents can be a part of your workflow, and whether it's helping you like. I mean, I feel like everyone is using AI to a certain extent, right, in their day to day, whether it's like writing emails or otherwise. But I think the rise of like agents is going to be transformational for a lot of these roles. You can almost imagine this opportunity of like multimodality where you're kind of taking these assets created from one agent and then moving it into another one. I mean, you're probably doing this today, right? Like you ask ChatGPT to write something up for you and then you bring it over, or you ask like it to create a project plan for you and then you ask maybe a tool like Onlook to go and execute on that project plan. And so I think being really comfortable of like jumping in between those stacks is going to be important, but the real unlock for people will be the ones that can really comprehend the power of what you're capable of doing with agents, which means that I think everyone in general is going to have to up level their technical skills to a certain extent. I think that's why you're starting to see a little bit of an explosion of a lot of the simplification, like the interfaces that simplify where agents sit. And so one thing that we think a lot about with Onlook is like, rather than having to press a button to do something or having to put, like a URL in a specific box before you submit it, like, is there a way that we can actually craft the tool around a query to pull out and do tool calls to understand like the better context of what would actually help the end user achieve what they're trying to do. So like I said, for that one example, right, like maybe rather than asking user, okay, if you want to build a clone of like a YouTube clone, could you actually pull in a reference of the old Vine website because I want the Vine branding, but I want like a TikTok style architecture, and have the agent go and actually be delegated to go and do that for you without you having to actually explain that to the agent. So that's like really high level. I feel like it's a little abstract, but I think the best thing I would encourage people to do is just start to experiment with agents that are bespoke for your industry. I think one thing we're experimenting a lot with is like agents in terms of growth, right? There's a lot of ways that you can have these people understand, or have these, I say people, but like have the agents understand, okay, this is the person we're trying to go and attract or get in front of. And so let me just understand, okay, look at their profile. Are there keywords? Are there like associations? Like, even potentially looking at like their profile picture or background or like work history to understand, okay, this person will resonate with your message because we understand from the context of the rest of the people that have tried your product out what this type of persona would look like. And so you'll see just like this extension continue to reverberate throughout the tech industry, where you're able to leverage these tools to get a lot more done. The challenge, of course, is like it's still very fuzzy, right? Like it'll make mistakes a lot, and I think the best way to think about it is like a junior employee that you just need to like redirect in some cases.
Interesting. Does Onlook still makes a lot of mistakes as well?
I mean, like Onlook, we've worked to make much better. We rely a lot on like external resources, of course, and so I think the one of the biggest challenges I think with working with AI products is just making sure you keep like the user expectations under control. I think a lot of times people will like ask for things that Onlook just cannot do, and so I think we still need to do some work on making sure that people don't feel like they came to a tool and are being that people don't feel foolish when they use the tool. I think that's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, is like how can we actually make the tool feel like, or make people feel amazing despite the tool maybe not being able to deliver what they needed.
That's very interesting. Let's manage expectations. Do you think over time, as models get increasingly better, and so far they have, and they probably will keep doing so, do you think 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, Onlook will be able to do everything the user wants?
I mean, I don't know if they'll do everything, but it is fascinating to see kind of how the models are becoming more and more like multimodal, and their capabilities are getting deeper and deeper. And so, you might be able to, you could definitely imagine that it would produce an output. But I think the challenge that I've had to educate a lot of people on is that when you ask, essentially a prompt to build tool like an Onlook, hey, make me a website, and you don't give it any other context, that the model is going to put out the most generic, like middle of the curve website it's just going to try to guess, right? But the biggest challenge, I think, with every AI product is providing the right insight and context for people to actually get like exactly what they're looking for without them having to put in that much work to bring it up to speed.
It's the prompting.
One thing that,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, the prompting. And the other thing is like the context of that. And so one reason why Onlook is quite effective for like our use case is because by default, people select elements on the page to provide that as context. And so it's like a natural behavior for you to direct the attention of the AI model to specific elements on the page and say, this is explicitly what I need changed. And so I think when you have that like ultra high fidelity that is like effortless to somebody, the UX feels really easy, and then they could get a result that's much, much better. Now, the challenge still goes back to the beginning, right? Which is if somebody just asks for a website, like how are you going to like surprise and delight them when they've given you essentially no context at all? There's a couple of camps. One strategy is, can you pre-populate the context to produce something that's beautiful off the shelf? But what we found is that, can you get them to use like a template of something that is like generically beautiful? So they're not asking for a website, they're asking for a website based on the style of this large pre-written block of code. But what that does is it caps like the diversity of what people can get. So if you pre-assign these templates or you do like tool calls to go find a template that looks good, then over time, after a couple months, people's websites all start to look the same. And what we found, if you cap the creativity of like these models, you tend to not get as much creative output a few months down the line because the models get better and better.
That's interesting. I agree with that because I've been using AI a lot and then I'm trying to use it less because not with websites, but yes, the results are pretty much always the same. And so you end up with always the same email, always the same, format for your YouTube video, always the same blog written, etc. So Watson has a style that you like, it's going to stay the same. And I'm wondering over time if that reduces creativity, because before AI, you would have some very unique and creative websites or blogs or whatever YouTube videos. And if everyone's using AI to build their website, it's also an opportunity. If you're the guy that still does his or her website manually and is very creative, you're going to stand out even more compared to all those other AI websites. That's another topic. Okay, before we're out of time, I want to finish with future bets and bold predictions. I love this segment where we try to talk a little bit about the future. I actually started with you because I asked you where AI is going and all those jobs. One that I wanted to ask you is, what's one thing AI will never be able to do well in design?
Yeah, I mean, I think like AI will always be at the middle of that bell curve, right? Of like all of like human knowledge. And so I think what is lacking from that context is kind of the same. I think about it a lot in like fashion or something, right? Where fashion kind of goes through these, it's this mix and mash of different styles from the past. I mean, cargo pants are in one year, they're out the other one. And so I think it's constantly why you see a lot of people just like reinvent their brands or their websites is because they want to inspire change and also stand out from the crowd. And so what AI is missing is the human element, like the emotion, the kind of like ego that comes with selecting and being in the context of a really competitive environment, which could either be in a place like fashion or in the competitive space of startups. And so what you'll see is like there needs to be a tastemaker that brings the context of what is like what is fashionable for humans and otherwise to be applied to as a surface to the brand. One thing that I think AI could potentially do is like just go look at like TikToks and Instagrams and understand that. But I think it's going to be very difficult to kind of calibrate that taste to something that will also appeal to the item or object or the entity that taste is going to be applied to. It's when I was doing a lot of brand work, I mean, I feel like people do not actually hire a brand designer to craft like some colors for them. They hire somebody in a black t-shirt who dresses nicely to sit there and tell them why these colors are going to be the best colors for them. And that story is what makes humans different than animals, than AI, is that we are really flexible. Like stories are what makes us different. So we wear different fashion because we're like, hey, I picked this up, I vintage shopped it. It was like from the 80s or something, right? And it's the same thing with brand and everything else that humans do too.
That's so cool. I couldn't agree more. Humans are storytellers. That's the basis of everything. That's the talent of Steve Jobs in tech, and many more since. But storytelling, just so important. Okay. What's the next one? Oh no, sorry, I'm not reading this correctly. I wanted to ask you this: what role? What do you think AI? What role will AI play in design that people still underestimate today? What's really underestimated?
Yeah, I mean, like AI is maybe not great at like the cold start, but it's an exceptional like design partner, a thought partner that you could lean on for getting to where you need to go much faster. So I know a lot of designers might be like apprehensive to beginning to use AI, but because they ask for a website and it looks like horrible. But when you actually equip it with a really great design system and really great context, it can make you move much, much, much faster. So I think like the learning curve, for most things is like this, where you go from like zero and it's gradual. But the learning curve for like using with AI is that you will have a pretty bad output to start. But as you nurture that into the direction that you want it to go, that hockey stick, like that growth curve will be much, much steeper.
It's a J curve, just like with the funds.
Yes.
You start negative and then you go a J curve. Very cool. One more. I know we're almost out of time, but I just cannot resist because I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. Because you build with community, because you get so many people, asking you for features. How do you decide and choose what you actually listen to and build, and what you just ignore because for some reason you think that's not urgent or that's not a great feature to build?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we we come a little bit from like jaded pasts of working at places that had maybe overpromised and had tried building too much within a short amount of time, and so I think as we decide about the product, like we use the product ourselves too, so it becomes quite intuitive when you're dog fooding what needs to happen or where the friction points are. Now, obviously, you also kind of you get a little bit too comfortable with like a workflow or a couple of those workarounds. So I think you kind of need to go into that designer mentality of, if I were to just step back and restart this with like a fresh set of eyes, what is actually non-obvious here. And so for us, we think that like, you need to get like that happy path defined really well. And anything that starts getting in that way, whether it's because of bugs or because of something you would have not expected, like anything that gets in the way should be addressed. But we really like to try to stay focused, and we still have our eyes on the horizon for the exciting stuff down the road, and we try to build in anticipation of that. But for now, we try to be realistic about what we can do today.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Where can people find you? Where can they try Onlook, first of all, and then where can they follow you if they want to stay connected to you?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we're at onlook.com. And so you could just try the product out there. It's very, very quick to sign up. You can get a website in just a couple of seconds. You can follow us on Twitter. We're OnlookDev. And also on YouTube at OnlookDev. We have a couple of videos out there that could help
Oh,
you
yes.
in your AI design journey.
Many videos, actually. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the thing that not a lot of people know about is that we actually write a lot on our Substack. So onlook.substack.com. Or you could just go to like our website and scroll to the bottom. You'll see all the links for our socials there. But we've been slowly declassifying our friends and family updates from last year. So you could actually, peek behind the curtain and see what it was like building a startup when we were in the Chrome extension days and ever since then.
I read that, and that's really cool. It really does take you. It's fun because there's the time difference. It's not that long ago, but it's a completely different time. So that's awesome. You should subscribe. Onlook.substack.com. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a blast. I hope you did as well.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. To our listeners, if you're still here, please give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can watch us have this wonderful discussion. It's even better. Thank you so much for staying until the end. And check out my other channel. Just type Gabriel Jarrison in YouTube, where I publish solo videos taking you behind the scenes of the VC world and YC. See you next week for another episode. Thank you, and bye, everyone.